Hello, it's Scotland at 7 on the 23rd of November. I'm Hugh, Stewart, and tonight I'm going to be discussing the news with our friend Sam Paton, who's over in Renton, in the Vale of Leaving. Good evening. Evening, Sam. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, Hugh. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm good, thanks. So I'm looking forward to discussing some pretty interesting topics, some important topics tonight, Sam. But first of all, we're going to begin with the coronavirus updates. Now, as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 3,631,217 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 2,921,818 have been confirmed negative, while 709,399 have tested positive. There are 2,527 new cases of COVID confirmed by a test today, though not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 17 new reported deaths of people who had tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 9,495. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 743 were in hospital last night, 60 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. today, 4,340,162 have had their first dose of the COVID vaccination, while 3,940,314 have received a second dose and 1,469,423 have received the third or booster dose. The latest UK daily figures show 144,137 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. That's an increase of 165 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. And also today, an update from the Office of National Statistics UK. In the latest week, which is ending the 13th of November 2021, the estimated percentage of the community population that had COVID was 1 in 65 in England, that's 1.51% of the population, and 1 in 55 people in Wales, 1.84%, 1 in 65 people in Northern Ireland, that's 1.53%, and 1 in 95 in Scotland, that's just over 1%. The number of deaths from all causes in the UK in the week ending 12th of November 21 was 13,780, which is a 17% increase, 17.4% above the average for this corresponding week over the years 2015 to 2019. So deaths are above the 5-year average in all UK countries. Of all deaths registered in the week ending 12th of November, 1,197 involved coronavirus COVID-19, which is 3 more than in the previous week. Deaths involving COVID-19 accounted for around 1 in 12 deaths, that's 8.7% of the total UK deaths. The number of deaths from COVID-19 rose in England compared with the previous week, but fell in Wales. So let's have a quick comment on that, Sam, because there's a lot of numbers there. I guess the important numbers I'm isolating, though I'm actually looking at them, so you've probably forgotten that plethora of statistics there. A number we often look at is the number of infections in Scotland per day, and it's now about 2,500. Okay, now, when I started reading out these numbers about a month ago, it was about 2,500 for a couple of weeks. Then it seemed to go up to about 3,000, right? So it's still really slightly higher. So the First Minister seems to see evidence today that it's been going down a bit. So it's back to 2,500 infections anyway. So but although it's down to 2,500 yesterday, but I think the moving average still looks like about 3,000, right? So are you feeling confident? Are you seeing any optimistic signs, or are you thinking that the situation is still very fragile?
First of all, I just want to pass my best wishes and condolences on to the friends and families who have lost somebody during COVID. It has been absolutely horrendous. It's been a really nasty disease and it takes no prisoners. And we are seeing so many families affected by it. And yeah, the numbers are sitting at a 14-day average of around about 3,000 at the moment. And the problem is with that, yes, thankfully, less people are losing their lives through COVID. But unfortunately, what's happening is more people are suffering from long COVID, and it's what's going to happen long term regarding that people's health. So that is quite concerning, and I think that's maybe main concern, with what's happening just now regarding public places and things like that. So we're obviously the Scottish Government and the World Health Organisation are still keeping a close eye on what's going on around the world, as well as smaller nations and how they're dealing with COVID and the infection rates.
Yes, the First Minister did in fact say today, while saying that we're not going to at the moment tighten up any of the mitigation measures, but she has advised us to stay with it and pointed out that there may well be the need to bring in more mitigation. So let's now move on to the next story on that, because we hear today from Nicola Sturgeon that a negative test now becomes part of the certification scheme. So people attending venues covered by Scotland's COVID certification scheme are to be given the option of providing a recent negative lateral flow test for a virus as an alternative to proof of vaccination. It means that individuals who received a vaccine not recognised by the MHRA, that's the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, or who have experienced difficulty accessing their vaccination record, will be able to attend a venue covered by the scheme. The change, which takes place from December the 6th next week, comes as the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced that there will not be an extension to the scheme to additional settings, such as cinemas or pubs. Instead, she told MSPs today in Parliament that whenever people intend to socialise or mix with people from other households, whether that's in a pub, restaurant, house or shopping centre, they should do a lateral flow test first. The certification scheme will continue to apply to major events and late night venues. Regulations and guidance for businesses affected by the change will be published in the coming days. The First Minister said, "This change makes it possible for people who cannot yet be vaccinated or who are not yet fully protected to make use of the scheme. I know that will be welcomed." Ms Sturgeon also said that she hoped that the new rule will encourage the greater use of regular lateral flow testing while still meeting the aim of reducing the risk of transmission within those higher risk venues. The First Minister went on to say, "We encourage everyone to continue to test themselves regularly, and particularly before you meet up with people outside your household, whether you're meeting in the home or in a public place. If you test positive, stay home, isolate, and take a PCR test." The words of the First Minister. So, Sam, if we unpick that, so I suppose the first point is that there was a widely expected announcement today, and the announcement really was business as usual. So were you expecting a tightening or an extension of the COVID passport scheme to more venues? And are you happy that it's staying as it was?
Well, Hugh, I'm actually quite happy the way it stays, and I think the advice is a lot more common sense and makes a lot more sense, because not everyone is able to access an app on their phone, because not everyone carries a smartphone. And I think we need to remember not everyone has access to a smartphone. So if they're going to a venue to have that information, unless they print it out. Personally, I take a lateral flow test every single morning. And the reason I do that is due to my work, because I work, or I can work, with vulnerable people. And not all those people, and what we need to be mindful of, that not everyone is able to get the vaccine. And that is the problem. It's not that people refusing the vaccine, but there is people for medical reasons who are not able to receive the vaccine. So it's about keeping these people safe as well, and allowing them to be able to carry on with their lives as well in a safe environment. So the lateral flow test, I think, is a great idea for getting into venues. It's a lot it's easier to administer, and with the new lateral flow tests, they only take 15 minutes to get your results. It's not exactly very long if you're waiting to go into a venue. 15 minutes, take the test, and you've got your results, and then and I think it's quite wise and quite a safe way of doing it. And I think more businesses should be doing it on a daily basis with their staff. It just makes people more aware. I mean, if we go back to when we were kids, we were very much a case of it was drummed into us about always washing our hands and things. So again, if we add that into our lifestyles of doing the lateral flow test daily or every second day, it's not exactly a great difficulty. It's not as an invasion of privacy, because I know a lot of people have been complaining about all these things regarding the passport schemes and things like that. It's just basically taking a wee test and it says positive and negative. It's so simple to do. And yeah, I agree. I quite agree with the First Minister with this one.
Yes, maybe this is the Scottish Government responding to suggestions that have come from various sources, including other politicians, that maybe it could be widened if somebody doesn't have the passport on their phone app. There's another one. There's another way of doing it. But the First Minister, of course, emphasises we do have to continue with the mitigation. This is just another way
Yes.
of keeping safety in public places. But the First Minister reminds us we do have to continue wearing masks in public places, in buses and on trains. But also, if you can get a vaccine. So we did announce today that something like 1.4 million people have now had the third vaccine.
Yeah.
So Scotland is actually the most vaccinated part of the UK. And I looked up the other day that we're probably about the sixth most vaccinated country in Europe at about 80%, I think, something like that, with 2 vaccinations anyway. So let's keep that going, and let's hope that we don't need to bring in any tougher mitigation if people just, stay with it. Okay, so no doubt we'll be discussing COVID again. I'm afraid it's not gone. Some sad news reached our offices tonight of a horrible bus crash in Bulgaria. At least 45 people, including 12 children, have died as a bus carrying mostly North Macedonian tourists crashed in flames on a highway in western Bulgaria hours before daybreak this morning. 7 people who leapt from the burning bus were taken to hospital in Sofia and were in stable conditions, hospital staff said. They had suffered burns and one had a broken leg. Bulgaria's Interior Ministry said 45 people have died, making it the most deadly bus accident in the country's history. The interim Interior Minister, Boyko Rashkov, said, "The picture is terrifying. Terrifying. I have never seen anything like that before." The cause of the accident was unclear, but the bus appeared to have hit a highway barrier either before or after it caught fire, Bulgarian officials said. The accident happened on the Struma highway about 30 miles west of Sofia, about 2 a.m. local time, Bulgarian officials said. The coach party was returning to Skopje from a weekend holiday trip to Istanbul, a trip of about 500 miles. The Bulgarian Investigative Service Chief Borislav Sarasov said 4 buses from a North Macedonian travel agency had entered Bulgaria late on Monday from Turkey. Television footage showed the bus charred and gutted by fire in the middle of the highway, which was wet from rain. North Macedonian Prime Minister Zoran Zaev said the passengers were all from Northern Macedonia, but appeared to include a Serbian citizen and a Belgian citizen. It was unclear whether the 2 were among the victims or the injured. Mr. Zaev said he had spoken to one of the survivors who told him the passengers were sleeping when they were woken by the sound of an explosion. He said people sitting at the back of the bus were able to break a window and jump out. The passengers were from various communities in North Macedonia, a country of 2 million that borders Bulgaria and is a home to an ethnic Albanian minority. So a horrible story there. What an unpleasant end to what should have been a fun trip for these people.
It's just unthinkable, Hugh. There's no words. Just condolences to all the families, and our thoughts are with them. It's just absolutely heartbreaking.
Absolutely, yeah, nothing more to be said. What a dreadful story. So let's move on to events which are still happening today in Westminster, Sam. We've been looking at the Health and Care Bill, which is passing through Westminster. Now, we must make it clear to Scotland at 7 viewers that we're referring to English legislation, but it is worth commenting on because these things sometimes have spillover effects into Scotland. So let's look at two sides of the Health Care Bill as it's been going through Westminster today. This is the second day of debate on the Health and Social Care Bill, which continues right now while we're on air. The bill includes a cap of £86,000 on the amount which care receivers will have to pay out of their own funds. Last night, the UK government added an amendment saying that the only element of care costs to be counted would be that paid for by the users themselves, not counting the contribution from the local councils. Therefore, if people need to fund their social care for a long time, this means that people will reach the £86,000 cap sooner. Opposition MPs and a significant number of red wall Conservatives voted against the amendment, but pressure from the government saw it pass by 26 votes. The bill means that poorer households can end up losing most of their assets, while owners of more expensive houses will keep most of theirs. The bill also reorganises the health service in England. Although health is devolved to the Scottish Government, of course, there are fears here that the power grab of devolved responsibilities to Westminster may end up affecting people in Scotland too. The English health service has already been divided into 42 independent bodies called Integrated Care Systems, the ICS. These include care providers and all of the care providers in their areas. They will be managed by a board which includes medics and representatives of private health companies. The bill changes the legal standing of these integrated care systems. The bill changes their legal standing, making them statutory bodies with greater purchasing and decision-making powers. This means for the first time since 1948, the health service in England will not be run as one body. Doctors' representatives and the Unite Trade Union are suspicious of these changes, regarding them as a path for the future privatisation of the health service in England. So I've divided that into two parts of the bill, which is still being discussed, of course. So let's just look at them in turn now. Again, this first part doesn't directly affect Scotland, but we have similar issues here, of course. So in England, if you have to have health care provided by the local authority, it was actually suggested, I think 10 years ago, by the Andrew Dilnot report, that people will have to contribute to their care costs. And of course, most people's assets means their house. So the cap of 86,000, now let's just unpick that for a minute. They've said that if you own assets of 86,000 or more, as long as you own 20,000, if you don't even have 20,000 in assets, you don't have to pay anything. But if you own between 20,000 and 86,000, which basically means your house, you're due to pay up to 86,000, then you don't pay any further after that. Okay, so that sounds fair enough. That was introduced a few years ago by the Dilnot report. So what's the issue here about that? So if you own a house, if you owned a house that was worth 86,000, then that means you might, at least on your death, you might have to hand over a house. The house isn't part of your will. The assets go to the council. On the other hand, if you own £1 million house, you still only pay 86,000, so your assets are still basically unaffected. So that's why there was a big argument in the House last night. Have we got that right so far, Sam? So if you the 86,000 cap sounds like a good idea.
I'm with you so far, Hugh. I'm with you so far.
I've been reading this myself just to make sure I've got it right. So the opposition MPs and the Tory rebels, well, they've been reacting to the government saying, look, this is fair. You don't pay more than 86,000. The rich and the poor, it's the same. So it's a good thing, right? So what's wrong with that then?
Well, the thing is, Hugh, it comes down to once again the Tories are looking after their own, the ones with money, and and if you look at it this way, when people pass on and they want to be able to hand their kids, their grandkids, an inheritance. They want to be able to give them something. It's something that we all fundamentally want to do. And what's going to happen is that people are not going to, normal everyday people, the normal people of society, have been out there grafting really hard for all of their working careers, been paying their stamp into the National Health Service, which we've all been led to believe that, you know, helps to look after you when you're older and so forth, and paying all these things, are going to get basically be forced to sell their homes, or when they pass away, their homes are going to get sold and nothing gets passed on to the families, because effectively they are in debt. And this is the heartbreaking thing as well. You know, because at the end of the day, when people reach a certain age and they're requiring care, a lot of the times, even with the care packages that people get, sometimes are just not enough. So a lot of the families have got to pick up that slack, and sometimes that includes giving, you know, themselves working shorter hours and making sacrifices and things like that as well to look after their loved ones and their families. And it seems to be they're getting a double whammy of punishment here, which is quite a shame. Whereas if you are in the top bracket of the disgustingly rich and wealthy, it's not really going to affect you, and that's wrong. It should be if they're going to be charging anybody with care, it should be a percentage. Personally, I personally don't think they should be charging anyone at all, because at the end of the day, people have contributed towards society. These people, you've contributed towards society all your life. You've contributed in all different shapes and forms and factors with the taxes you pay and everything else. So you should have the right to be cared for. That should already be kind of in a pot there and effectively be paying for it. So that's my opinion on it. But watching it last night, I was watching bits and pieces of it last night. I've not really kept up to date with it, and I know it's still on just now, so I never really kind of checked before I came on air. But it's absolutely disgusting hearing the Tories actually trying to justify this. And one of the things that's very apparent in my mind is that, you know, the health service has been, you know, they've been pulling stones from under the wall of the health service for quite a while now.
We'll move on shortly to the second part of the Health and Social Care Act, which is how the health service is being reorganised in England. But just to draw a line underneath our first discussion, the sort of things that have been proposed to do instead of the cap, which, as you say, the government has been pushing a cap as a good move because it's a limit to how much you pay. So what's wrong with that? But as you say, it's better it's more fair to some people than it is to others. So, for example, I looked today at the average house price in Hartlepool, a typical red wall seat, a place which went Tory. The average house price there is 104,000. I looked up today. So that means somebody in Hartlepool could end up losing, well, what's that? That's over 80%, nearly 90% of the value of their house. Whereas if you own a £1 million house in Surrey, and a lot of people do, you're only going to lose 10% or less of the value. So as you say, Sam, doing it as a percentage instead of a flat rate, that would be fair. A flat rate is grossly unfair when people have very different levels of assets. Oh, just finally, before I move on, the other proposition that has been put forward as an alternative, of course, to this huge social care dilemma is a social care service equivalent to the health service. Nobody could afford healthcare if we had to pay for it ourselves, but we're being asked to pay for social care ourselves, and similarly, we can't afford to pay for that. So it's the only alternative then. Well, Johnson's alternative, as we know. Sorry, Prime Minister Johnson's. Let's give him his proper name. The Prime Minister Johnson's alternative to dealing with social care was, of course, the hike on the national insurance tax. So that's he just couldn't see any other way around it, but there is another way around it, which is to have a social care service funded in the same way as a health service. So let's move on to that now.
To be honest with you, Hugh, the way they could fund it and the way they could get around it is stop awarding all these contracts to their friends in private healthcare. If they were funneling the money into the national service to start with, where it should be going, and we wouldn't be in this mess, to be honest with you. They've created this disaster themselves, and they've done it deliberately so they can push through this bill and make out that the health service is actually failing in England, when the reason it's failing is through their mismanagement.
Well, that leads me to the criticism I've been reading today on the 42 care bodies. Now, of course, this is England, but as we know, there's been moves since Brexit, really, moves to concentrate power and decision making in England. So, particularly with proposed trade deals with America, if one of these 42 independent health services in England decides to make a contract with an American company and they say, oh, we'd like Scotland as well, the Scottish government, of course, will say, no, you're not. You're not doing that. But that can be overruled. It can be overruled by Westminster, or it can be overruled by the Supreme Court. So the reason we're focusing on the 42 different health services which they're going to have in England is because if they do it there, concentrating power in London means they could do it here. Now, just before I ask for your comment on that, I'll just underline that the Unite Union believes that this 42, dividing the health service in England into 42 separate bits, which are all separate decision-making bodies. That actually means they've already broken up the health service. And there's a doctors' organisation, I think they're called Every Doctor. They've been campaigning for some time now against this bill because they are convinced this, as you said, this is the start of privatising the health service in England. So it's happening in England, it's not happening here. But might it happen here?
Well, the thing is, Hugh, if England want to force Scotland to privatise the NHS, it's actually quite simple for them to do, and this is what people need to be aware of. All they need to do is cut our budget for Scotland. At the moment, we get £34 billion plus X amount a million, which sounds like a lot of money, but really it's pennies per head of the population. And all they need to do is cut that budget and put the Scottish Government in such dire straits and turn around and say, right, you're getting less of a budget, or we're not putting it up in terms of the rate of living standards or the rate of inflation. And then the Scottish Government have got to then force to start juggling and start trying to look at alternatives for things like our NHS. And that's the scary thing about it, that with Westminster having central control over our budgets in Scotland, there is so many ways. Another way is, as you mentioned, through trade deals. And that's the scary thing. So even though what's going on just now in England doesn't affect us directly, it affects us indirectly, and that's what we've got to be aware of. And that's why it's very interesting watching, and especially when you're seeing how the Scottish Conservative members are actually reacting to this. At the end of the day, all the people that vote for Conservative up here in Scotland will now be, I would be kind of urging them and begging them to pay attention to what they're doing down in England, because if they think they can get away with it down in England, they will do it up here in Scotland.
Now,
And
well, on that topic, Sam, I was looking earlier on about how the Scottish Conservatives, as people may remember, there are 6 Scottish MPs returned for Scottish seats. And I noticed this afternoon that 2 of them have voted for the bill so far. That is Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack and former Scottish Secretary David Munnell. So they've both voted for it. And I've just been checking through the list. Douglas Ross did not vote. I don't know if he wasn't there or if he abstained. But I haven't seen any Conservatives in Scotland voting against it. So are you surprised?
no, I'm not surprised. The end of the day, they're interested in themselves. That's all. They're not interested in their constituents. But a wee bit of history on the NHS here, and this goes to show you how important the NHS in terms of historic means has been in Scotland. The Vale of Leven Hospital, which is just along the road from me, was actually the flagship NHS hospital built in the UK after when NHS was created, and basically after the Second World War. So Scotland has played a vital role in the NHS and building the NHS historically, and we need to protect that. We really need to protect the NHS, because what we have here is something pretty special, and not many countries in the world have a system like we have. And it will be interesting to see what happens tonight when the debate finishes and they start voting. And it'll be interesting to see what the Scottish Conservatives are going to be doing and how whether they're going to vote or whether they're going to
Yes.
abstain.
Yes, we'll have a look at the final vote tomorrow. Yes, as you say, it's vitally important to Scotland that we are able to, keep the health service public. And isn't it ironic that when people in America, Democrats in America, look to Britain and Scotland and say, that's the kind of publicly funded health service we need, and isn't it ironic that at the same time, Conservatives appear to be saying to Americans, no, we want to make our health service more like yours, and one that nobody can afford. Now, so I think, yes, we will look at that. We'll see what happens with that one. And let's move on to the next story tonight, which is moving on to a topic I mentioned earlier on, which is Brexit. Our first Brexit story tonight is about a multi-billion pound Brexit hit as companies shift to the European Union. The SNP today has condemned the extreme damage the Tory government's Brexit deal continues to inflict, after new figures revealed that billions of pounds worth of investment have left the UK for the European Union since Brexit. Analysis published today by the Flanders Investment and Trade organisation, the FIT, found that the region of Flanders in Belgium has seen more than 2 billion investment as the result of UK-based businesses shifting their bases from the UK to Belgium because of Brexit. The figures show that 89 international companies have moved their investment projects to Flanders from the UK in the last 3 years to avoid the barriers caused by Brexit. Commenting, the SNP's Europe spokesperson, who's Dr. Philippa Whitford, said, businesses in the UK are continuing to pay a heavy price for the Tory government's extreme Brexit deal, with these latest figures showing billions of pounds worth of investment moving from the UK to the Flanders region alone. Trading barriers, higher costs and Brexit red tape are forcing businesses to move from the UK to the EU in order to be able to trade more freely. Brexit has been nothing short of an unmitigated disaster and an act of economic vandalism that continues to harm our economy and deliver a hammer blow to firms. Philippa Whitford there. Not holding anything back, it's an unmitigated disaster, it's a hammer blow. Yeah, well, let's look at the good side of Brexit. Is there one?
Is there one?
Yeah, okay, right, thank you for dealing with that point, Sam. So I guess the 2 points being made...
There was a good side to Brexit.
The 2 points, yeah, we're trying to be balanced here, so we're still looking for it. So first of all, Prime Minister Johnson's oven-ready deal, it was what they used to call the hard Brexit. Remember, Sam, a couple of years ago we used to say, yes, but are you going for a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit? And people like Rees-Mogg and Prime Minister Johnson would just say, we're going for Brexit, that's it, plain and simple. But afterwards we discovered hard Brexit, that's the one he was going for. And it's not working, is it?
No, this just takes me back to all the conversations we have had on Broadcasting Scotland regarding Brexit and how over the times that this has all been talked about, and we said that the businesses were going to leave and everything that's happened, it's happened. I feel as if I should be a clairvoyant, maybe I should go back and kind of start a business on clairvoyancy and go, I predicted that. But however, seriously, I'm not surprised. We all knew this was going to happen. We knew it was going to be a hard Brexit. We knew that it was going to, once again, surprisingly enough, basically benefit the few at the top and everybody else was going to suffer. And that's exactly what's happening. And even small businesses are suffering. I mean, for me to post to the EU or post anywhere in the world with it does no longer has a trade deal. It costs an arm and leg from postage. And this is what people don't understand, is this is the effect of Brexit. And the only ones that are able to deal with that is the big boys, the big businesses. The small businesses can't absorb the costs. So it's affecting all the small businesses more than anything. The big boys, they can absorb it. They can do their tax avoidance schemes. They can move their headquarters to somewhere else. Whereas those of us who are left behind are left dealing with the mess and Brexit. Um, since we're before 9 o'clock and I promised I would behave on tonight's show, I am not going to say any bad words and I'm going to be really nice. But all I'll say is definitely not surprising, and backdoor Boris has basically proven what we all knew what was going to happen.
Yes, I must say, it didn't look like a good idea to me at the time. And of course, as we emphasised last Friday, we did a special on Brexit so far. Scotland, of course, voted against it because whatever damage it's doing to the UK economy is doing more to Scotland for various reasons, which I won't go over again. Watch last Friday's programme again if you want to catch up. Whatever's bad for England is twice as bad for Scotland. That's just a general rule of thumb. So obviously, this is not a story that is going to end for some time because it's going to continue delivering bad news. So I'll just finally ask you one more question, Sam. Do you think Brexit can stick because it's a bad news and increasingly opposition is growing against it in England? Is Brexit going to stick, or is somebody in the future going to have to say, some post-Johnson Prime Minister going to have to say, it was all a big mistake? It didn't really happen.
Put it this way, it's going to take a very brave person to be able to do that, because they are going to have to admit that they basically told untruths to those who have voted in favour of Brexit, and they made false promises. And that's going to be a difficult one, because a lot of people out there are still waiting on the golden ticket, believing that they voted for something and it's going to give them all these wonderful dreams and everything's going to come true. And there is still people out there who actually genuinely still believe that they're waiting on this golden ticket, not realising that's never going to happen. And I think up until now, COVID's been the perfect shield for Brexit, because it's managed to cover up a lot of the problems of Brexit. Now that we're starting to see things slightly open back up, and we're trying to have a more normal life, we are going to start seeing a lot more. People are going to start to realise the problems that Brexit is actually causing, and it's got nothing to do with COVID.
Yes, I think that's true. We believe in Broadcasting Scotland that other media outlets have been underplaying the damage that Brexit is causing. And I think that some media outlets, in fact, are using the COVID as a cover. But yes, that's not going to work any longer. Now let's move on then. So another Brexit story, which we've heard about today, a post-Brexit scheme to lure Nobel winners to the UK fails to attract a single applicant. A post-Brexit scheme to draw the world's most celebrated academics and other leading figures to the UK has failed to attract a single applicant in the 6 months since it opened, it has been reported. The visa route open to Nobel laureates and other prestigious global prize winners in the fields of science, engineering, humanities and medicine, among others, was described as a joke by experts after ministers admitted its failure to gather any interest. Chances that a single Nobel or Turing laureate would move to the UK to work are zero for the next decade or so, the Nobel Prize winner Andre Geim told the New Scientist magazine, which first reported the news. The University of Manchester academic, who was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2010 for his work on graphene, added, "The scheme itself is a joke. It cannot be discussed seriously. The government thinks if you pump up UK science with a verbal diarrhea of optimism, it can become somehow a self-fulfilling prophecy." As part of the scheme announced in May, the winners of some of the most prestigious global prizes were offered a fast track to a global talent visa, allowing them to live and work in the UK without having to fulfil other criteria. For scientists, the programme covered Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry or medicine and the Phison International Prize, while for mathematics, just the Fields Medal was listed. Those from computing, engineering and social sciences had a handful of eligible prizes, while a Brit Award was also on the list. Okay, so that's one of Boris Johnson's jokes, is it, Sam? Nobody came at all to this party.
Yeah, it's basically verbal diarrhea, wasn't it? I'm glad that he said it, and I'm just quoting, so I can't get into trouble for saying it.
Yes, you're quoting an expert there, that's allowed.
Yes, exactly, exactly. This is, I mean, seriously, after everything that's happened with Brexit, their behaviour towards people that are not British is disgusting, and they expect people to come here and attract people. I'm not surprised it's not attracted anybody. I mean, it's not exactly a very welcoming environment. Come to Scotland, we'll welcome you with open arms. But however, yeah, it's basically one of Boris Johnson's dodgy dreams and jokes that
Yep.
he likes to come out
Building
with.
back better.
That
World leading. Yeah, everything's world leading, isn't it? So
yeah,
that one.
we're better than the rest of the world and all that jazz. And
Yep.
you can see that nobody takes him serious even across the world.
Well, yeah, we have heard from one or two international commentators that, Prime Minister Johnson's reputation is not of the highest, maybe. Now, on the EU,
No,
we're going to move on to a story about EU foreign policy now. We've been reporting for a couple of weeks now on the Belarus-Poland border situation. Now, today we hear that the European Union is threatening to blacklist airlines linked to the transportation of migrants to Belarus. Today, the EU has published a draft law that would blacklist airlines and travel operators who fly people to countries on its borders as part of the attempts to destabilise the bloc in the latest response to the crisis at the Poland-Belarus border. The proposal does not specifically mention Belarus, whose authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko is accused of engineering the arrival of thousands of people at the Polish border, where a desperate humanitarian situation has played out in recent weeks. Companies could be banned from flying through the EU or landing and refuelling at EU airports, regardless of whether their involvement in attempts at destabilisation was intentional or not. The proposal closes a gap in EU sanctions laws, which are country specific. The EU recently agreed to extend sanctions against Belarus, but it can only target Belarusian companies rather than foreign airlines involved in bringing people to Minsk from the Middle East. Ylva Johansson, the EU Home Affairs Commissioner, said the law was needed in response to an unprecedented situation. She said Lukashenko was trying to sell tickets to the EU and charging people 10,000 to 20,000 euros for a one-way trip to Minsk and then onward travel to the EU border. European Commission officials believe much of the value of this law lies in the power to deter companies from getting involved in such schemes. Turkish Airlines and Iraqi Airways restricted flights to Minsk after EU officials began talks with the Middle Eastern governments on this issue. Speaking to the European Parliament, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the situation on EU's eastern border was not a migration crisis, but an attempt by an authoritarian regime to try to destabilise its democratic neighbours. So, Sam, again, we've been reporting on this story, and from various reports, it has been quite clear that the so-called refugee crisis in the border there was actually deliberately engineered by Lukashenko. And we read today he's also been making money out of it. Not only has he been using these poor people as a human shield, he's also been charging them a lot of money they get flown to Minsk, and then they get the bus to the border, and then they have to sit and look at razor wire for a few days before he takes them off again. So is the EU beginning to look at its own ways of trying to fight back, right? And saying, well, this is what he can do. What can we do to come back? What's our response?
yeah. The thing is, there's such a difficult one because Lukashenko is using people as pawns and innocent and vulnerable people as pawns, which makes it even worse. And I mean, Lukashenko, just when you think he couldn't get any more nastier, or he just, he just brings something else out the bag and he goes for something else. He is certainly, he needs to be removed. He really does need to be removed from office, but it's been able to do that without putting innocent people in danger. Which is the difficult thing. And it's good that Turkish Airlines and Iraqi Airlines have agreed not to carry out flights to Minsk. And hopefully, we're talking to the other airlines, they can get an agreement with the other airlines as well not to do that. Because the thing is, this is creating a massive humanitarian situation at the borders. And these people, it is such a shame. You see the footage on TV, families who haven't got a clue what is happening. They have paid what they believe is legitimately paid this money to get a flight to Minsk, and they believe they're getting access into the EU, and they are doing so. And one of the things, there was a report on one of the other dodgy stations the other night, and the journalist was talking to some of these people, and he was trying to find a way to get back to Iraq, and he was saying to, if MD's in Iraq watching us, don't do it, don't do it. And it's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking, and I hope the EU and the UN and NATO find a way
Yep.
of getting Lukashenko under some sort of, I'm going to use the word control. I don't like using the word control, but they need to do something, because this man just keeps going another step forward, another step forward. And it's what he's going to come up with next to cause destabilization in that particular region of the world. And he's quite scary. He is quite scary. It's not even funny scary, it's serious scary
Well,
of
there's
what's
no
going
doubt
to
about
happen
that.
next with Lukashenko.
Yes, as you know, the opposition leader, Tinoskaya, of course, can't even go to the country. She's
Yeah.
running the opposition, I think, from Lithuania, is it? And we reported also last week that there are still thousands of political prisoners. So he's by no means popular in his own country. So that's no doubt a story we'll come back to. Now, I'm going to move on to a couple of other stories that have reached our offices today. First of all, the Scottish Government has 4 million more for mental health professionals. We learned today that an additional £4 million is going to be invested to help reduce waiting times for adult psychological therapies, or PT. The funding will allow boards to recruit additional mental health professionals, enabling more adults requiring PT to be seen. It will also allow practitioners, where appropriate, to use virtual technology to reach people in more remote locations or those not able to attend in person. The funding forms part of a £120 million Recovery and Renewable Fund. Wellbeing Minister Kevin Stewart announced the funding during a visit to PT therapy staff in the Shotts Health Centre in North Lanarkshire. He said today, across Scotland, talented and dedicated staff trained in psychological therapies provide high quality care and are helping more people than ever, despite the substantial increase in demand placed on them by the pandemic. I want to further support the service so we can increase the speed at which people receive their care. So I notice we're running out of time now, Sam, so I wonder if you get any comments on the increased psychological pressures people are under due to COVID.
People are under so much strain. I see it quite a lot, and they really do need a lot more support and mental health COVID has created. So it's good news, so fantastic, and I hope the money gets spent wisely and goes where it's needed.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Sam. Yeah, that's certainly a need that the government is trying to look at. So let's move on to another story that we've been talking about a couple of years. It's about the £200 million fund to help close the attainment gap in Scottish education. All Scottish pupils experiencing poverty will benefit from targeted funding in the year 22 to 23 to help close the attainment gap. In an update to Parliament outlining plans for the next phase of the £1 billion Scottish Attainment Challenge, Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville confirmed the £200 million funding for the year ahead. Recognising the impact of the pandemic and poverty on pupils across the country, a redesigned approach to the challenge will see funding of £43 million extended to all of Scotland's local authorities to help tackle the attainment gap and to support education recovery. Head teachers will receive up to £130 million next year through the pupil equity funding. They can decide how best to invest this to support disadvantaged pupils in their schools. Local authority work to improve the educational and wellbeing outcomes of care-experienced young people will receive approximately £11.5 million, with around £9 million reserved for a number of national programmes supporting children to reach their full potential. The Scottish Government will also work with local authorities to set out the expected pace of progress in closing the gap? Well, Sam, there's a couple of issues there. First of all, of course, the attainment gap, that is to say that better education outcomes for middle class and better off pupils, and of course the greater access to university education, has been an aim of Scottish government policy for some time. And the other issue here, I think, is about how head teachers have been given some control over funding themselves. So let's look at the attainment gap itself. As I said, it's been policy for some time that more funding should be targeted towards the kind of groups that don't tend to do well in education and don't tend to get into university. So as far as you can see, has that been closing, or is it just not closing fast enough? Is that the issue?
From a personal point of view, I'm going to speak as a mum now. Basically, it is closing, and we are getting there. It's not perfect, it's not there yet, but we are getting there. I think what I've seen as a mum, with friends within the education system, is a lot of the times, they've done an amazing job with the kids, high school, primary school. I even know some lecturers at colleges who have worked so hard with COVID and everything, and making sure that people are supported. And it has been such a difficult time. But one of the things that I've noticed is it's support for these people themselves. These people have been supporting the pupils, supporting their students, but they need a bit of support. They need a wee kind of helping hand. They need a wee bit of, whether, it's a wee bit of well-being and mental health support. But this is what I'm seeing from my point of view, that you're seeing some of the staff just look absolutely exhausted. And it's the same with the NHS staff as well. Anybody that's been through COVID and that. But yeah, it is getting better. And some of the techniques that are happening in Scotland in terms of education, especially in the primary schools, are just absolutely amazing. And wow, you see kids, they're encouraged to go and learn research from such an early age. I mean, I never get taught how to research in primary school, how to go away and do research, but kids are taught how to do all these things from primary school. They're taught how to debate. It's absolutely amazing. And our kids in primary schools are so more aware of the environment. They're so more aware of local politics. They're so more aware of national politics. They're so more aware of international politics. They are so aware of their rights as children, which as a mum sometimes can come back and bump sometimes. But they are, we are producing really, we're producing some amazing minds in the education system, and we need to keep that going from high school and into further education. And the way we keep that going is supporting the staff that are doing this amazing job. We need to support the staff to do this and carry that on and have that enthusiasm to keep these wee minds growing. And because what I'm seeing at the moment is just amazing. And I'm just going to do a wee shout out because my son's school just get built. He is in a new built school which just opened in October there, and the kids designed the school along with the architect staff. That was part of their education, was learning about how to design the school, the materials, the structure, everything to do with it, the colours, everything. And what they've done is just an amazing job. And that's all been through kids being involved. And these kids now are just flying because they have got the bug of, learning and researching. And when you're talking to them, they're like, do you know about this building? Do you know about this? And it's about feeding that enthusiasm. And I do believe in order to do that and do that right, we need to support the teaching staff and supporting the teachers and supporting the head teachers as well.
Of course, the fund, as we said, is going to be, to a large extent, it's going to be local. Head teachers can decide this is what we need, this is what our pupils both need here. I think as you were discussing the achievements and that excellent example of your children's school, it strikes me that's really probably what we're on about with the curriculum for excellence. I don't work in education. I used to work in colleges, but I believe the idea seems to be about building up skills and building up confidence to make citizens of the future. And we don't do that by rote learning and sit down exams. We do it by discovery and teamwork. So maybe it's a bit early to see that working through the whole population of school children.
To be honest with you, Hugh, my other son was actually one of the I'm going to say the guinea pig, but it wasn't. It was the pilot scheme way back in the day when they were trialling the curriculum of excellence many years ago. And he's now came out the other side. He's 21. And he came through it, and it was a total like that. It was the pilot scheme, so it wasn't working as well as what it's working now, because the teachers were just learning and at the start of it. But he came out the other end, and it just the way it worked was working with the kids' strengths rather than trying to pigeonhole all the kids. It was working with their individual strengths and what they're good at, and finding what they're good at and growing in that. And even when he went into high school, that carried on. Now, this is schools that are not from affluent areas. This is schools from what you would call deprived areas. So it can be done, and it is happening. And the fact that this fund is coming out and it's going to be going to the head teachers is really good, because then the head teachers can control where the spending's going and give their staff a lot more support as well to do this. But the curriculum of excellence, at first I was, as a mum of a child that was going through the pilot, the first couple of years I was a bit worried and concerned about it. But because I've already experienced it, and then my other son is smack bang in the middle of the curriculum of excellence, which is running the way it should be running. I definitely think it's a great system. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay, well, let's hope we're ending on a positive note there. Obviously, there's a lot more to be done, but the policy on narrowing the attainment gap is what we're talking about here. So the Scottish Government's continuing to keep its eye on that ball, according to that report out today. So that's about it for tonight, Sam. So it's been excellent discussing these topics with you. Thanks for coming along to give us a hand.
Thank you very much for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. So I'm going to wind up now, Sam, by saying to our viewers watching us at home there, thanks, first of all, for tuning in or logging on or finding us tonight or tomorrow, whenever you're looking at this. And if you're one of our regular viewers, well, hello again. It's been good to be back with you. And please pass it on through your social media, pass on through YouTube, whatever channel you're watching on, and try and get more people. If you want broadcasting for Scotland, by Scotland, made right here in Scotland, news from Scotland's point of view, then we can do it with your help, of course. So thanks for subscribing if you are. And if you've just come across us, then please please consider subscribing. And you could also give us a few quid. We always spend any money we get on, 99% of it gets spent on programme making. Some of it gets spent on coffee. But the more money we get in, the more programmes we will make. And I can hear that Sam's on here. You just reminded me earlier on, Sam, that you live quite close to the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. So an example of the new programmes we're going to make is we want to do more music. So going through into 22, we're going to put on more music programmes. And in fact, we're going to start next Tuesday because it's St Andrew's night. So we're going to have a music special here. And I'm going to invite you right now in front of everyone, Sam, to come along and sing the bonny banks of Loch Lomond for us. Whether you do or not.
I don't think so, Hugh. Yeah. I think the most that you'll get out of me is Big Fish, Little Fish, Cardboard Box.
Oh,
now, that's my thing.
Well, that sounds fine. Tell me what key it's in.
I'll come on and do Big Fish, Little Fish, Cardboard Box. That's not a problem. Do you know, I've actually managed to get a few politicians to do that as well, off air, but we need to try and get them in on air.
Okay,
Big
let's
Fish,
see.
Little Fish, Cardboard Box.
Okay, well, you heard that first on Broadcasting Scotland. Okay, so that's about it from me tonight. So look forward to music next week for St Andrew's night. And so from Sam and me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.